I really want to do something about not being able to see Lori over here because I felt terrible. She did a great job in that first hymn, and I jumped us immediately to the hymn of praise, and I saw her fly into the finish. And I was just thinking to myself, man, I really should be more cognizant of things like that. So thank you very much. Thank you for flying quickly. All right. Happy 4th of July weekend to you all. I want to say today we remember and we give thanks to all who have worked, given, and sacrificed and struggled for the cause of freedom for all people. We give thanks and we're grateful for soldiers, for police officers, firefighters, peace activists, teachers, healthcare workers, artists, musicians, volunteers, social workers, and many, many more. We're thankful for all who are committed to the dignity and worth of all human life. And in the light of our fireworks last night, which again went on for a long, long time, in light of our cookouts and celebrations for this weekend, I'm struggling with the message of our gospel lesson from Mark. I want to focus in on the second part of our gospel lesson because there's kind of two parts. There's 1 through 6 and then there's 7 through 13. And I've got some questions here, so you might want to get your cheat sheets out. All right. So what's going on in the second part of the story? What is happening? Yeah, Jesus is sending out the disciples to travel, all right? And it isn't, what troubles me about this isn't so much that Jesus sends out his disciples to preach, teach, and heal, all right? Because that's normal. We kind of expect Jesus to do that. But it's how he sends them out there. What are the disciples allowed to take with them? Just about nothing. There's like one or two things. What are they allowed to take? They're allowed to take sandals, which is nice. Jesus let them take footwear, which is always a good thing. They're allowed to take a staff to fight off wild animals. That would have been the purpose behind having a staff. And one set of clothes. Only one set of clothes. All right? And that's interesting to me. So what are they not allowed to take? Not allowed to take a second set of clothes. They're not allowed to take money. Somebody else said something else. Bread, no food, and no iPads. no iPads. All right, sounds good. And there's one other little item on there that says, it kind of gets missed sometimes. No bag. You're not allowed to take anything that you can carry stuff. So here's the tough question that I've been struggling with all week. Why does Jesus not let his disciples take these things? I mean, Jesus spends more time when he's sending them out, he spends more time talking about how they should travel than what they should do, or what they should say, or what they should preach. So what's up with that? Why does Jesus focus on stuff? Well, that's possible. It could be a safety issue. If you don't have anything, you can't get it taken from you. No, that's a good point. I wonder if it has everything to do with how the lack of money, how the lack of stuff, how the lack of supplies will make the disciples act. Jesus is forcing the disciples to depend on others, right? Because if they don't have any food, what do they have to do? They have to ask for it. That's right. Jesus is ensuring that his followers will have to rely on the generosity of strangers. Jesus sets up a situation where the disciples need hospitality. Think about it. If again, they've only got one set of clothes, they're going to freeze to death if they don't get a place to stay at night. They don't have enough clothes to stay out in the middle of the night. And the disciples can't pay for anything that's given to them. They can't earn the food that's given to them. The disciples are forced to depend on others. And this is where the story challenges me. I don't know about any of you, but as a lifelong Lutheran, I don't like to be dependent on others. And I don't like to owe people anything. I don't like to be indebted to someone. I like being able to pay my own way, to earn what I receive, to repay favors and help that I've been given. Does anybody else share my uncomfortableness with being dependent on others? Anybody out there? I find it striking and challenging that on the 4th of July weekend, Independence Day, we hear Jesus talking about our need to depend on others. Is this hard for us to hear? I think there's a strong story in our country of this idea of the independent, self-made man or woman. You know, that somehow it's bad to admit that we cannot make it on our own. In hindsight, though, if I'm honest, most of what I have, most of what I am, has been given to me. My parents raised me, they fed me, they took me to the doctor when I was sick. I was educated in public schools where my neighbors paid for my teachers and my school buildings. I learned to read and enjoy books at public libraries. My first car was given to me by my grandfather, and I drove it on roads paid for and built by others. Even the cup of coffee I drank this morning, it was picked down in Central America and sent up, and I had to go to a store where somebody had stocked it on a shelf. I can do very little for myself. The ways I'm dependent on others for life and for success goes on and on. How about you? In what ways are you dependent on others? What ways are you dependent on others' skill and wisdom and abilities? In what ways have you been gifted in your life? We spend a lot of time in our church talking about how important it is to be hospitable, right? We spend a lot of time talking about how generous we are as a church, giving away to various different causes and all that. We spend a lot of time planning and planning ways to be welcoming. I wonder if this morning Jesus is teaching us that it is equally important to be able to regularly receive hospitality and help ourselves. What could possibly be the gifts and lessons to be gained by being dependent on others? I have a few guesses, which I'm going to list off in a minute. But I know that not everybody likes to talk out loud during sermons. So I invite you, if this idea of dependence, it churns with you, email me, call me, set up a meeting. So here's a couple ideas that I have about why dependence might be important. Throughout the Bible, God reserves a special place and advocates for the Holy Trinity. All right, the Holy Trinity in the Old Testament are the poor, the widow, the orphan, and actually it's a holy stool. It's not just a trinity, and the immigrant. All right, and I wonder if Jesus is trying to make his disciples poor and vulnerable, and I wonder if by doing that he connects his disciples with people who need help. I wonder if it is harder to judge or begrudge those in need if you too have had the experience of needing help and hospitality. Perhaps by having to ask for help, ask for food, ask for shelter, this will inspire Jesus' disciples to be more willing to offer these things to others who are in need. In addition to connecting us to the poor, I wonder if Jesus seeks to connect his disciples, connect you and me, to people who we would normally consider strangers. It's interesting to me, who does Jesus say that we should stay with? Yeah, you got it. Any place that welcomes you. Any place that takes you in. Any place that gives you hospitality. Jesus does not specify what race the host should be. He does not say if they're gay or straight, which one. He doesn't say, only stay with Republicans or only stay with Democrats. He doesn't say how moral they should be. He doesn't say what religion they should practice. All that is important to Jesus is whether they welcome and help those who are in need. What if realizing that none of us are self-sufficient. None of us have achieved what we have on our own. Breaks down the barriers that often seek to divide us. How can we hate someone that we realize that we need? How can we bomb someone that we realize that we need? How can we ignore or insult or mock somebody if we realize that we need them? Lastly, I wonder if by sending us out into the world dependent rather than independent reminds us continually of God's grace. We are saved, forgiven, and loved through our baptisms given to us, free of charge. We cannot earn nor deserve God's love. There are no words we can say, no knowledge we can possess, no deeds that we can do to be worthy of God's welcome and hospitality into the kingdom. I think it's interesting. Martin Luther, you might have heard of this guy. He, on his deathbed, he's supposed to have said, his last words were supposed to say, supposedly, we are all beggars. I like that. We are all desperately in need of each other and dependent on God's grace. So where does this leave us? Where does this leave you and me and all of us, the saints and sinners of St. Peter's Lutheran Church? It's one thing to say that we are in need, but it's altogether another thing to ask for help or to receive generosity when it is offered. This morning, all right, we started off our service. You have already been given a full pardon for all of your sins, known and unknown this morning. But what other needs do we face in our daily lives? So I want to leave us with two challenges for this week. One, and I think our kids can teach us this, because it didn't seem to bother them at all to ask Michael, but how can each of us be a gracious recipient of someone's gift this week? How can we simply say thank you rather than trying to dismiss their compliment? Or how can we be grateful rather than trying to figure out a way to repay them so that we can be even? Number two, this is a harder one. Can we reflect as a congregation, as a church, how we are in need? What are we missing? Who are we missing? We are disciples. We regularly practice the marks of discipleship that you see around here. We read Scripture, we pray, we worship, we volunteer, we share money, we welcome people. And yet we are also called to be apostles. We are sent out each week into the world to care for others. And Jesus is saying we are also sent out into the world to be cared for. What do we need as a community? Who could help us? I pray for the humility for all of us to celebrate July 5th today. Happy Dependence Day. Thanks be to God and amen.